Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Pin Cancer podcast. My name is Skylar Grote, and I am Pin Cancer's growth marketing manager. If you're new here, Pin Cancer is a non for profit that unites wrestlers, coaches, and fans to raise awareness and money for those affected firsthand by cancer. We believe in fighting for those who are fighting this great battle and using our platform in the wrestling community to truly make a difference. Today is a special episode because I am joined by someone who actually reached out to us through Instagram with a story that really resonated with me. Dayna shared a bit about her husband's battle with cancer, and I knew immediately that we had to get her on this podcast and, share her story with all of you. Stories like hers remind us why we do what we do, and I'm honored to have her here today. So, Dayna, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Dayna Von Thayer Burnworth. I know it says Von Thayer on my Instagram. I was a wrestling mom, effectively had 3 kids and 12 years of consecutive wrestling momming. We lived in Dallas, Texas. I live in New Jersey now. And my husband was diagnosed with leiomyosarcoma in 2018, and we just lost him in December. Pin cancer was actually something that he found while Googling one day. And of course, we saw it and saw the important work that is being done, and we follow pretty closely. And as a mom of also a daughter who wrestles, I am very familiar with Skylar's work and wins.
Yeah, so I want to touch a little bit about the wrestling aspect a little and just kind of like where you're from. We talked a little bit before we got on here about Texas. You know Lexi Basham and Kaylin,
Oh, yeah.
my friends. And so, yeah, talk about Texas wrestling. Talk about your kids growing up wrestling in Texas a little bit. We want to hear it.
Oh, sure. So I'm originally from Ohio, where wrestling, of course, is huge. Lived in Pittsburgh. We lived in Virginia. We lived in Boston, London. And then we made our way down to Texas, and we were there for 13 years. My eldest son, when he started, wrestling wasn't that big in the school, but it started to blow up. And then my middle son wrestled. Um, and so then it was my daughter. So she was the youngest. And for a long time, she wasn't allowed on the mat. It wasn't until they switched coaches and coach Brian Kenny, who you may be familiar with, was one of my son's coaches, and he was the first coach that would actually let her get onto a mat. And so she, would go to open mats in 7th and 8th grade, and eventually made it to Team Texas. And she was part of the Spartan Mat Club in Fort Worth. And so, yeah, Lexi, Kaylin, they were great influences and incredible wrestlers. Camille Fournier, Samara Chavez, they were her mat partners. And they're also just incredible girls and incredible athletes. And I was a wrestling mom, so I got to go to Fargo a couple of years and do that whole thing.
Yeah, we owe you wrestling moms a lot. You guys do a lot for us.
We were happy to do it. Watching, those 3-a-days, so much work. She wrestled as a cadet and a junior, as typical with Texas. And it was hard. Very often she was the only girl in the mat room for a long time, and she would have to recruit other girls. She was 95 pounds too. So finding mat partners was really hard. She had incredible captains as freshmen that were very hard on her, but fair, and would wrestle with her and wrestle hard. And, we're really grateful for that.
Yeah,
Um,
I always joke with Lexi and Kaylin because they're so tough. Like
they're
I
so
don't I
tough.
don't know if it's like a Texas mindset or what, but it's just kind of like they take no shit and like
None.
you do everything hard and I love it. I mean, wouldn't say I'm softer than them because I like hard work too, but dang,
And you're from New Jersey. You can't say that.
I know, no, I'm tough too, but dang, they tell you how it is.
It is. And
They
so
really
my daughter was always very much on the shy side. She was very quiet. She never wanted to be in trouble. She just wanted to work really hard. And of course, when you're in a mat room and you have Lexi and you have a Kaylin and then you have a Camille and you have some of these other girls that were all state champs, they're all nationally ranked. And very often my daughter wouldn't even have another girl
yeah.
in the room, and that was always really hard. And so then it would switch and she would suddenly be surrounded by these incredible girls. It was always kind of a duality thing. And there was one match, it was over a Christmas break, where Lexi was screaming my daughter's name in this deep, deep, barbaric voice. And it was hysterical. I was laughing. And her brother was there and she won. I will say she won the match. And her hair is like nuts. And they took a picture together. And they're very tough, but also incredibly sweet. Incredibly sweet girls. And so we were always just kind of grateful to even find other women,
Yeah.
really, sometimes at the end of the day.
No, that's great. Yeah. Okay. Well, now that we got how you are connected to the wrestling world,
Sure.
I do want to deep into or dive into a little bit about your husband. Like what was his
Sure.
background? Did he wrestle? When he was
Yes.
diagnosed, when you guys kind of had to go with this journey, and just a little bit more about that.
Sure. He wrestled in school in Ohio. He was raised by very deeply religious parents. And I guess it was around junior year, his mother would no longer let him because she thought the singlet was obscene. And he literally wasn't allowed to anymore. He also played tennis, but he was a 200-pound guy. He was 6'1", over 200 pounds. That's a heavy tennis player. But he stayed active in it and he worked in the fitness industry for his entire career. He was a vice president at a treadmill company here in New Jersey. He was director of operations for a fitness company in Dallas. And that's also what took us between Ohio and Pennsylvania, Virginia. He did effectively kind of the same things corporate wise for fitness companies. He put a fitness center into Harrods in London. We lived in London for a while with our kids. And so he did that in like Belfast and so on. Again, doesn't have social media, never a day, doesn't even understand how most of it works. But it was just kind of this old school, I'm not even kidding, fanny pack, cargo pants, all the pockets. He went to every single practice. And not just in wrestling, it was softball, it was tennis. He coached and he volunteered coaching. And so he would volunteer with wrestling, he would volunteer with tennis. You name it, he was out there and he was doing it. When my kids were in orchestra, he was at every single thing that he could be. Um, and he had a bump on his knee. And this is a guy who never drank, he never smoked, never did a drug in his life. His biggest addiction was, birthday cake. And he did 1,000 push-ups every day. And when I say every day, I mean for over a decade. When we lived in DC, he had a lot of friends who were like special forces and Marines. And because he had asthma, the Marines wouldn't take him. So he, short hair, worked out like you wouldn't believe, taekwondo, that kind of stuff. And was just a fitness guy who came home every day and, was just loved his family. And he had a weird bump on his knee. And he had it for a long time, years, and he kept having it checked. And maybe it was a Baker cyst. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was that. And in fact, we were in Fargo. It was 2018 when our daughter was wrestling with Team Texas. And he started sending me texts saying, that weird thing on my knee? I think it's changing. And I was like, that little bump? That's weird. So, mind you, Fargo is July. From July to September, it went from being a tiny, flesh colored, painless little bump that we always thought was maybe a cyst or something to being this massive thing on his knee. And so went and had a biopsy, and his surgeon actually had to come out and talk to me and said, we're not actually even sure entirely what this is. It's some kind of a sarcoma. We have to send it to the Cleveland Clinic. The Cleveland Clinic didn't even know where this came from. They said, I think we're going to have to send this to the Pasteur Institute. And that's when we found out that it's this incredibly rare leiomyosarcoma. And in October of that year, he had surgery. And then it started the whole journey of chemotherapy, of radiation, of more surgeries. And from 2018 on, that was kind of our lives all of a sudden. And it really was such a knock for pretty much everybody, because especially because of his size, he would go out with the heavyweights to warm them up when they didn't always have someone. He was the dad in the stands that was out there, getting dirty and sweaty with the guys. And there were a lot of them who were like, I'm going to try to take Mr. Burnworth down. I was like, you're not. You're gonna have to really wear that guy out first, you know, to get him. And, he just had such a wonderful relationship with all of these wrestlers. And we're talking years because my kids are all 4 years apart. This is 12 consecutive years of kids that we saw from our daughter being in kindergarten, and having these high school boys yelling at her, say sprawl, on the mat, to watching these kids get married. Um, and it was just such a shock. And then it was, of course, during COVID that we found out his cancer had spread to the lungs. And he started having, surgeries. He had to have a lung resection. At this time, our daughter was the one who was in high school, and our boys had grown. One was already grown and out of the house, and one was, finishing up college. And we had to start making some really tough decisions of treatment, what treatment was available. And also because we lived in Texas, the heat was the biggest kind of knock, and he went online one day and was just looking at different things. Cause also we missed wrestling because that was a weird year with that COVID, of not being able to go see all of our stuff very suddenly. Everything was kind of arrested. Um, and he found pain cancer. But because, again, like I said, he has no social media whatsoever, he just would say, go find this, go buy me this shirt, go buy me, go see what they're supporting, go send money. If somebody's doing a camp, go buy a camp and have them donate it to a kid. And he would do that for certain, charities, or whatever. And that's how we found.
This was during his cancer diagnosis that he found pain cancer.
He found pain cancer. So he was diagnosed in 2018. He found pain cancer probably 2021, I think. So our daughter was graduating high school, and
Mm-hmm.
she chose to go to Rutgers, sight unseen, did not know a single person, had never met anyone, did not been to New Jersey other than driving through it, when she was a kid. And she was like, I don't want to bring any germs home to dad. I'm just going to research and see who has marine biology and where close to a city. And of her colleges, she chose it. And she let the system choose her roommate, choose her dorm. She just showed up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, in an odd way, I think what wrestlers do too, that kind of tough mentality. Like, I just need a gym and a cafeteria and I'm fine.
And then
Um,
correct me if I'm wrong, you guys
sure.
came to New Jersey to be with her or for better treatment or talk
No,
about
it was a mixture of treatment and climate. Once she went off to college, we were still in Dallas, and his condition was getting worse. We could tell that it was getting worse. And because he was already asthmatic, breathing that heat is really hard for him. He was starting a new chemotherapy drug, which we did not know, by the way, at the time, would turn his thick, dark, curly hair bright, bright white, like
Wow.
a Yeti. And he wanted to see her off. He was like, there's no way I'm starting chemo before taking her to college. And so he flew up, and we were terrified because he had been so ill. And it was during that really bad heat wave in New Jersey, that August of 2021. Um, all of a sudden, he was back. He was lifting beds. He was, who needs this? Who needs that? You need something heavy lifted? He's got it. And I went, where have you been? And he said, I can breathe. I haven't been able to breathe like this for like a decade. I feel alive. And so we went back and talked to his oncologist, and it took about, another year or so to realize, to kind of put things together that we really have to move back up north. It would be better. In fact, we were going to Virginia. That was the plan because we had lived there for a long time. And a treadmill company here in Randolph, New Jersey, had actually offered him a position as a vice president and built him an office so that he could have, really clean air. And so we said, okay, I guess we're going to move to New Jersey now. So,
Yeah. No, for those of you that are listening in, we're basically like neighbors now. So that's pretty
yeah,
cool. So I
we
live
are.
Well, I live in Branchville, New Jersey. I guess like half the time I'd say I'm full time in Colorado Springs, but my parents live in Branchville, New Jersey. So Branchville and
Okay.
Sparta are like, I don't know, 10
Right.
minutes apart, right next to each other. So we came to that realization before this podcast, just talking briefly. So that's pretty cool. We're happy to have you in New Jersey. I love New
It's
Jersey.
beautiful.
It is beautiful. And I think when people hear about New Jersey, they think like the city automatically and they think of like the rough parts of New Jersey. But in North Jersey, you have the best of every world. You have, some mountains, whether you consider them mountains or not, but you have elevation, but then you also have lakes, and then you have the
Yes.
Jersey Shore, like an hour and a
Yeah.
half from me, 2 hours away from me. So yeah, you just have like the best of all worlds. It gets cold every now and then, but you get winter, you get spring, you get fall, you get summer. So I'm really happy to hear somebody else that's like, New Jersey's great.
It's it's really beautiful. And I've lived in a lot of places. And so I can say without really a whole lot of bias that it is really beautiful here. We first moved in August of 2022. Again, sight unseen. It was a 100-year-old house. It had been redone. It was not a great option.
Okay.
The house itself was great, but they had removed all the trees and then stopped there. So it was nothing but a foot and a half of mud surrounding this house like a moat. Um, and as soon as we moved in, he drastically declined. And it was the past 2 years have been really brutal and it's been really hard. Because again, I don't know anyone here. We found out just after moving that his cancer had gone typically like sarcomas do. It had been in the lung and now it was in the bone. And it had invaded the epidural space in the spine, causing his back to break, effectively, just fracturing his back. And very suddenly, and they would call him Mr. Push Up, like the kids knew, and he would do it. He's like, how many do you want to do? I can do this many in 34 to 36 minutes, not 35, 34 to 36 minutes. And it was a thing. It was a challenge. I mean, he had this whole section in our house that where his handprints were that nobody could touch because they were perfect. I mean, it was a thing. We're talking decades of it. And very suddenly, this 220-pound guy couldn't walk. He couldn't get up and down the stairs. He couldn't sit. And everything just kind of went kaboom.
Mhm.
And I realized I needed to find better options. And so I ended up finding a house, like I had mentioned earlier, that was 6 minutes door to door. He went to the Sparta Cancer Center where they were able to administer and administer not only chemotherapy, but radiology, his cardiologist, his gastro, because he ended up, as soon as we moved in, having a series of strokes and heart failure. Um, and because he was so strong, very often it was minimal and it would come back. And he had actually, as soon as we had moved in, I had been gone. And of course, my phone slipped under the car, broke under my seat. I didn't know where I was. I saw a sign from Morristown. And I was like, I think if I find something that says Easton, PA, I could find my way. I'm completely going blind. And I ended up getting home and he had had a stroke about 5 minutes after I got there. And it was really scary. And it was minimal. I mean, it was so quick. And then he came back. But I think of those moments and those times, if I didn't have a lot of things that I do, which is I'm able to work from home. I have really good direction. I'm able to find my way for the most part, except for the jug handle situation. New Jersey and I need a conversation about the jug handles. But I have driven across country without issue. There have been a few times I've been in New Jersey, like, why am I lost in the same 1 mile square? Um, but I mean, there are a lot of things that are very scary. But that said, that's why we moved here. I found that they had this incredible cancer center, incredible doctors, and they really enveloped us in a sense of community. Um, when you don't always get that, especially in healthcare. And wrestling is very often like that too. We just lost him in December. And it was the last year has been just horrific with that. And I'll tell you what, the day we lost him and I started letting some of my friends know, my phone started ringing back to back to back, and they were all wrestlers. These are people I haven't spoken to in years. And some of them didn't even know the other one knew. It's not like they even went, because I just assumed they went to a group chat and said, "Did you hear about Mr. B?" They didn't even know. And I was like, if this is not an example of the wrestling, wrestlers are people of action,
Yeah.
you know, they just are. And I think that's also why he certainly gravitated towards the sport and we gravitated with our own children. Um, that because it's so unique that there's no ball, doesn't even matter what kind of shoes you wear. It's you're looking at a mirror image of yourself across from you. It's someone probably with the same training, same weight, maybe about the same height. And you're talking right those micro adjustments that you make. Who got the most sleep,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And that sort of mental toughness of
No,
it.
true. I think we also, because wrestling is so hard, and I think like there's kind of a parallel like in fighting cancer too, right? Like that's really hard as well. And so it's like when you go through the trenches with people in a sport, right? It's almost like
Mm,
you're united in your family through anything. So I feel like probably,
right.
when your husband was diagnosed too, those people, those wrestlers, they're like, no, we're gonna help him, we're gonna support him through this too. And
1,000%.
I feel that so much as well. It's like with my coaches, with my teammates, it's like I've been to hell with them, and it's like I
Yep.
know that anything hard in life, they're also going to show up for me. It's just kind of like this mutual understanding that, we're there for one another no matter what.
Oh, 100%. When he was first diagnosed, it was still such a shock that we actually didn't tell anyone because he really needed to process it. When I tell you he had his very first surgery and thought he was going home, he's like, I have my push-ups to do. I have work. I have all these, signatures to do. And I said, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be in the hospital for 3 days. He goes, I'm not going to be here for 3 hours. I'm going home. And I mean, that's just, he's a linear person and this is what's happening. And you can't tell him otherwise. And I think also because you're so healthy as wrestlers, right? You take your health. I mean, you think of almost any other sport,
Yeah.
you know all of your nutrients. You take everything that you're taking in. And, and he's in the fitness industry too. So, I mean, and also was young. He was in his 40s. So he was just 49, and his youth was really such a shock. Um, and I'll never forget the first person I told was a fellow wrestler. It was my daughter's captain's dad. He missed it. His son had gone off to college and he came to watch our daughter wrestle. He was like, I'm jonesing. I've got to see something. And he immediately was like, where's Eric? And I said, you know, so Eric had surgery. And mind you, the day he came back from one surgery, my daughter had gone to Iowa for preseason nationals, you know, and so we're in the thick of it, right? And then wrestling's still happening. And, the more people would say, hey, because he was at everything, where's Eric? What's he doing? That was always really hard to kind of explain. And the shock on the face, like, what? What are you talking about? You know, it was always really hard, but the wrestling community just, I'll never forget that day. I will never, they called me before a lot of my friends called me. And it was, and I was on the phone with the one and I said, so your best friend who they had wrestled together, like, he's calling me right now. And he goes, I didn't even tell him. They just,
No, they find
ins-
out. They find
yeah,
out.
they instinctively knew to, and again, these are people that I will cheer on for the remainder of my life, but I don't talk to them all the time. But we grew up with them and they grew up with us. And I remember when they had their first set of braces and, now they're like in law school and that kind of thing. And so it's always just, it's really hard in some sense, to just, it's heartening to know, especially these conversations, the funny ones, because again, my husband there with his fanny pack, opening it up, like standing outside drinking a milkshake when it's 20 degrees, and um, and he was kind of larger than life, and just kind of he just loved the thick of it, and he also didn't care. I think the biggest thing is that he didn't care who you were on the team. He didn't care if you were the best state champion or if you were in the JV. He was in your corner. If no one was there for you, he was there. So if it was your first match or your 100th win, he was there. And I took the video for the team too. So I had phones and tripods set up on all the corners. I had charts, and I had, kids coming to tell me like so and so's on this mat and so and so's on that mat. And, just we loved it as far as a family, of course. And that's why I reached out, was going through all this. And again, now I live here alone in an empty house. And, very suddenly with all the chaos, everything just kind of went, it's very quiet. And it was really important to me that, like Pin Cancer knows that how much those things matter, even just in passing. The shirts, whole closet filled with Pin Cancer shirts, Wrestle for a Cure, how much he loved getting one. And like, oh, this one's thick, just um
Yeah,
and
we're so grateful to, you know, impact the community. And I think one thing I just want to touch on briefly is Dan says it, like, when you have a loved one that gets a cancer diagnosis and stuff, it doesn't really hit you until it affects you and it affects your family. And
right.
Dan talks on that a lot. So it's like pin cancer brings like a whole different meaning when it impacts you, directly. And
Right.
so and we've all had people that have battled, with cancer that we know. And so I think it's just great that I get to help and I get to impact the community and I get to make a difference. I just had a friend pass away from cancer
I'm sorry.
recently in September. It was okay. But he's so right. Like when it impacts someone that you're close to, it brings in a new meaning and it brings a new passion. And yeah, you could see that in a lot of families that are affected.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And knowing that, because the wrestling community is really small when you think about it. I mean, again, you wrestling with these girls that, like I met Lexi's brother before we even met her. And in fact, this was during a time when my daughter didn't know she would be allowed to even be on a team. She was in middle school. And the coach said at this community college, go to one of their practices and they may have a girl there. And Dustin was there and was like, yeah, come on. And, she's like 12 maybe. And she's like, is this okay? And I was like, it's okay. Go ahead. Because she was so used to hearing, you're not allowed. You're not allowed on my mat. Um, that it was a wild thing that not only am I allowed, they want me to be here. So there's a lot of layers, of course, to that. But also just in the way they kind of move through life, even as wrestlers, there's because like my one son, he's in Iowa now. He's an aerospace engineer and he's getting his master's. Um, so, my daughter's at Rutgers. My son has been wearing Rutgers shirts to Iowa to just kind of like poke the bear. Um,
That's funny.
it just he's like that's what they do. And so he does some MMA as well and jujitsu, and they're just certain things. And I think a lot of it comes with that, the mental toughness, of course, that comes with the physicality of it. And that's why my husband, by the way, did all the push-ups. People always wonder why. He's like, if you want to control someone who's across from you, do the push-ups. He goes, because it's not weight, bearing. And it is a mental grind staring at that same spot over and over and over. And if you do one, you can do five. You do five, you can do 10. If you can do 100, you can do 200. And you just push and push and push until some point you're pushing harder than anybody else. And it was just, I mean, decades of this that he would do. And I think that's probably what also hit so hard was because, at the end, he was only 165 pounds. And I was lifting him to move for certain things. And he was in the hospital a lot this past year. That was very hard. And during that time, funnily enough, some wrestlers would text him once in a while and say, "Hey, Mr. B, I'm buying my first treadmill," or "I can't find this weight," because he had been in fitness forever and he would be, getting immunotherapy or chemo or something. And he's like, "Don't buy that cheap, whatever, whatever. I'll find you one." And he would find something in a closet somewhere or some warehouse and
Yeah.
have it delivered. And, there's a lot of love to and from the wrestling community. So,
And that, I think that mindset, we talk about it a lot. It's like, I feel that too in wrestling because wrestling's so hard. It really does prepare you for everything and anything. And I think that at least what I've learned from you in the last, 35 minutes is that your husband had that mentality. And even though he passed away in December, it seems like that mentality, it can carry you far, like it can, when you keep positivity and you keep fighting, like it really can bring you a long way. And I think that's super, important for people that are listening and maybe they're battling cancer, or maybe a loved one is battling cancer, to just like keep that positivity and to make the days as best as you can, right? You're gonna have some
right.
bad days, but to know that try to get the best out of every day and stay as positive as possible, in these situations. I think sometimes, in wrestling, you have to do that too. I just competed like 2 weeks ago, and I know that wrestling isn't near battling cancer, but I woke up and I didn't feel good. And it was just like my day was kind of thrown off. I didn't have a good warm up. I was wrestling at one of the hardest tournaments, in the world. And you have that moment of like feeling bad for yourself and just kind of like, dang, I don't feel good. But then, I was kind of reminded that like, I get to do this. Like, I get to do this wrestling. Like, I'm healthy. I'm here. Like, you need to fight through this. Like, you need to get through this. And I think, as wrestlers having that mentality, like, you really are prepared for like anything in life.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many parallels with wrestling and with life as it goes anyway. Um, and again, I'm not a wrestler. I wrestled, I think, in PE class in Ohio when I was 5. Obviously, that makes me amazing. I mean,
I'm sure if it was more around when you were younger, I think you'd be right there.
I'm here as a support system. I hand out the gummy vitamins. I have the coconut water. I'm definitely on a support level. But even in little things, because this is obviously very hard and it was very hard for my family. I'm really grateful that now that we're spread across a little bit, all the kids were here, at the end, and that we were able to be together because it's just hard. There's just no way around it. I had a day because again, I work from home, and I'm grateful that I could work from home so that I could take care of him. I have a really hard job, and some days it made it really difficult, and I had to take time off. I had to go on a leave of absence at the end, to be with him. And I had just started work again in January, and very slow getting back into it. Nothing was wrong. Not a single thing was wrong. And I don't know why, but all of a sudden, I cried for 4 straight days. There was nothing wrong other than I have a comically large tear that is falling from my eye while I'm in the middle of a presentation. Thank God the camera wasn't on. And I just had to wipe it away and say, "So we're looking at Article 2. I want to go to 2.3. What does this language look like for you?" And my face is chapped from crying. And nothing is wrong other than obviously this is what you go through sometimes when you're exhausted and you're emotionally drained and everything. And funnily enough, I went to, this is one of the reasons why I even reached out, was I ended up going to the wrestling tournament for Rutgers and Penn State. I had had season tickets. I never can make it, so I give them away. I kept that one because in the back of my mind, I kept thinking maybe Eric will feel good enough that I could go to that. And obviously we had already lost him. Um, I had been in such a state that I hadn't slept in 4 or 5 days. And I kept thinking, I'm going to go drive down here. I'm not going to feel like going in, and that's okay. I ended up going and I was surrounded by, all these people, and all it took were some people behind me to talk a bunch of smack. I don't know anything. I mean, I didn't go to Rutgers. My daughter does. I was alone. That's all it took to activate me. And Dean won, and all of a sudden, and you can talk to Lexi, you can talk to Kaylin. I am the most obnoxious fan you've ever met. I have the loudest voice that will cut through the din, and I will scream for you and completely embarrass you. And I sit with all the moms, and we all pull each other's hair and go nuts. Um, and I did. And all of a sudden, like, I went and got a hotel room for that night, and I slept like a baby. And afterwards, that's all I could think about, because I like went to brunch with my daughter the next day, and she's like, "I'm so glad you had fun. Did it give you PTSD?"
Aw, that's awesome. That's a great story. Yeah, I'm so glad that we connected with you and we were able to connect with you. I have one more question for you.
Oh, sure.
So for those listening today and they have a loved one battling cancer, or maybe they're battling cancer themselves, what advice would you give them?
Oh boy, a lot of it. As a caretaker, from the caretaker side, I would say you, as wrestlers, you never want to stop. You want to keep going. You want to keep the grind. I understand it's in your DNA. It's what makes you successful. Find a way to actively rest, however that is for you. Go for walks, socialize, make sure you utilize the people around you. And not everybody's going to fill a lot of the same roles for you, especially with a cancer diagnosis. I have a friend of mine who sends me Snapchats. I do not know how to use Snapchat. I have exactly one person on it, and she sends me the dumbest stuff you've ever seen. And it is hysterical, but she knows what she's doing. And it pulls me a little bit out of, because you can feel very much like you are in the middle of a tornado and life is happening around you, and you're just, it's chaos and it's sad and it's scary. Utilize the people around you, and you know what they're for. If you have that one that just wants to go outside and walk dogs, go do that. My biggest, whether you're fighting cancer or you're a caregiver, a parent, a child, whatever, I would highly encourage you to write, because I'm a writer. That's actually what I do. I gave up my entire career to do something else so I could take care of my husband. But I've always written. And there is something about putting your thoughts on paper, whether it's a notebook, Google Docs, just write it. I would love wrestlers in particular, hint, hint, to write their books. I would love to read your memoirs. There's so much that you can give while also giving it to yourself to help separate your feelings. And sometimes it's really helpful to go back and look at something and say, I didn't even realize I felt that way at the time, you know, and not just on bad days, on good days too. Write about it. Read. If I could offer, I mean, especially for sports people, Open by Andre Agassi is probably one of the best memoirs, let alone a sports memoir, that you're ever going to read. He didn't use a ghostwriter, so it's his real words. And back to what you were talking about with your tournament, for example, there's a little bit in there. And again, I haven't read it since maybe, almost 20 years. So forgive me, maybe 15, where he talks about, I mean, Andre Agassi is obviously incredibly talented, right? And he's what, 15, 16. He doesn't want to go do this camp. His dad's making him. He just wants to get a car and a girlfriend. He doesn't want to be there. So he goes on a tennis court with, like jean cutoffs and cowboy boots. And, the guy said, I'm not going to kick you out. There's one way you get out of here. And it's very easy. And he's like, what? What do I have to do? He goes, lose. Just lose and you're gone. That was the one thing he wasn't willing to do. So all of his antics and all of his tantrums, losing wasn't something that he was willing to do. I know me personally, I don't have that. I don't have that kind of wrestling. Those are not my gifts. We've all lost, right? At some point. But there are a lot of lessons in that book. So I highly recommend writing about it and reading a lot of things, because you learn a lot about life and managing your own emotions and how to, because ultimately, whatever you're going through, being of service to others is always going to be the best thing that you can possibly do. So whether you're feeling high or you're feeling low, find a way to be of service to your
Yeah.
neighbors, to your community, to whatever. And so, yeah, I did. I went to that wrestling match, and when I tell you, I had like tears. I was that kind of thing walking in, and I'm like, you better get it together. You don't know any of these people, and I got out of the car and it was freezing cold. So my body naturally was like, we better stop this, because we're going to freeze. And then the energy, and again, the PSU talking smack, I was like, no, I'm going to,
I love that. It's almost like your body, even like when you're around wrestling or you're in wrestling, it almost like my coach said it, like, because I was not feeling good or whatever. He's like, your instincts are gonna take over. Like it's like community. It's like
it's muscle memory.
yeah, it's muscle memory. And I think that that's kind of similar to, you going to the match. It's like, no, I'm meant to be here. Like, I'm meant to be a fan. Like, this is my thing. Like, I love it.
100%. And
So,
seeing even some of the wrestlers who, and again, I don't know any of them whatsoever. My daughter's terrified of the entire team. She
yeah.
goes to the gym and she's like, no, that one scares me. He was carrying like 100-pound dumbbells in each hand. That's like unethical. That scares me to death.
Yeah, no, it's definitely instinctual. But I just want to say thank you for coming on today and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. And
Yeah,
if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. Um,
yeah, no,
by
I was inspired by your story just over, Instagram, and then I wanted to hear more about it. And it's crazy that you're in New Jersey. We're gonna have to catch up when I'm home, which I'm home a lot. So, I'd love to
anytime.
grab coffee and talk to you a little bit more. And, for those of you listening in today, if you want to help Pin Cancer, you can go to Pin Cancer's website. It's just pincancer.org, and you can make a donation, or you could just share our page. That helps as well. You could buy a t-shirt. All the proceeds from our t-shirts go towards furthering our mission. Sorry. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for listening in to this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank Dayna for coming on. This was a great conversation, and let's keep wrestling for a cure.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course.